Morning.
Morning.
I still have to get to those traps. It's like every Monday, Tuesday when I'm in, I'm frantically prepping class, and then by the time the end of the day hits, I'm like, oh, that was the last thing on my list.
It's all right.
How are the plants doing in the greenhouse? I haven't been in there in so long.
They're doing pretty good.
Is he using it for his research, or has the research kind of stopped and you're just maintaining the collection?
Kind of just maintaining the collection.
Does he still have his Amelanchier in the back?
Yeah.
I haven't seen him all semester. Do you see him often?
No, I haven't seen him either.
Yeah.
We've only been talking through like email and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how like being another level up, it's like you're in a whole nother building. So Burmese python, I think I have a picture. I must have presented your article, so I'm not going to go through my 2 slides, but I'm recalling the image. Oh, I must have pulled the image. I have an image on my slides of a Burmese python in like full-on consumption mode. It's crazy how big they are.
Yeah, I found some pictures too. They're like huge.
Yeah, gosh. Another reason maybe Florida's not for me. Hey, Derek.
How's it going?
I hyperlinked. Have you guys seen the Cane Toad movie?
I don't think so, no.
No? Okay. So I embedded it in our like lecture overview page as a something for you to do over the weekend if you guys have the time. Hopefully you'd be able to watch it. I think it's like 40 minutes, but it's a quite entertaining story of the cane toads. I'm gonna make the kids watch it. It's beautiful out. I cracked the window. You can hear all the highway noise probably.
Yeah, it's really warm out today.
Melt all that ice on my driveway. That's good. Morning, Hannah. Hey, Justin.
Morning, how are you?
Pretty good. You?
Doing pretty well. We've had some pretty good weather lately, so
Right?
it's been gorgeous. I think it's supposed to get up to like 55 today.
Yeah, I got the I read the riot act. You better go on the walk with the kids today. It's too nice a day. I didn't leave my chair yesterday because I had lab and then like office hours after, so
yeah.
I gotta make the most of it because it's gonna get a little cold again, but
yeah,
we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Hey, Maddie. Hey, Mina.
Hi. How are
you?
I think everybody's taking advantage of the beautiful day today. We'll wait just a little bit longer. Have most of you guys had GIS? Yeah. Let me see a show of hands with the hand raised or thumbs up if you have. Okay. All right, so not everybody. there was something that I was going to explore with you guys in the pollution, kind of in the pollution unit, dealing with lichen. I was involved in a project over the summer on an NSF grant where we developed kind of like a rapid activity to get students out in the field and collecting field data, but also analyzing it spatially. And it used NEON data. I don't know if you guys, have you heard of NEON? It's a National Ecological Observation Network. So there's these big towers in all over the country, and there's a couple like in international locations that are kind of like Eric Liebensberger's data buoy, right? They're all rigged up with telemetry to gather information on precipitation, the chemicals in precipitation like sulfur and nitrate and things like that, and then you know, temperature and so on. And these data are readily available on a website. And so part of the project was, again, for lichen, you know how lichen are such good indicators of air quality and pollution, was to look at a landscape scale. So in GIS, open up GIS, pull in some of these NEON data, and you can kind of display them as symbols that are small if it's not like a, you know, polluted area, or bigger if it is more polluted. And so you can kind of see hotspots where some of the pollution is an issue. And then you guys go out and, using iNaturalist, go over to a tree and evaluate the lichen distribution on a particular tree. And I was hoping that we'd be able to get out and do that. I still have aims to do that. I'd love for us to be able to be out in the field. I know some of you are, you know, restricting being on campus and whatnot, but I think maybe as the weather turns, we may just be itching to get outside, just at least for, you know, part of a day. And that may be something that I'll have us do, but I'll give you a heads up and make sure that everybody goes, you know, is alerted so that you can get your testing in that week before that we would be able to meet up. Okay, so that's sort of on the radar, something I'd like for us to be able to do together as a class. All right. So today I wanted to talk about that habitat fragmentation chapter, that chapter 5. And I had asked you guys to read it over before we jumped into invasive species that we're going to be covering. What were some of your big take homes? Just kind of, anybody have a thought? Again, right, the Kariba text is making us question these long-standing beliefs. And the chapter is 40 years of bias in habitat fragmentation research. What were some of the things that struck you guys?
Didn't you say there was some positive effects of habitat fragmentation? That was
Yeah.
kind of confusing.
Right. Just like we learned, you know, plantations and stuff, you know, habitat loss and destruction or turnover for those primates wasn't a bad thing, right? We're learning here, at least in the survey that this guy by the last name of Farig had done, is questioning whether or not it really was bad. I think in one location they mentioned 118 studies reported 381 significant effects of habitat fragmentation. 76% of those fragmentation effects were positive, right? And we teach you, you know, that fragmentation is overall bad, right? We always think of like roads. It's gonna, you know, isolate your patches. It's gonna increase the edge on the patches. And we know there's all that, you know, negative edge effect. So yeah, surprising. Any other kind of take homes that you guys got as you went through it? What is the difference? I mean, what were they talking about? Why is it kind of confounded? What are the two things they kind of smashed together and talk about as one?
The habitat fragmentation and loss, he said, were different. And
Yeah,
I think he said the loss was more harmful, but the fragmentation wasn't. But you can't like
exactly.
study them separately per se.
Right, exactly, Naomi. So yeah, I'm gonna pull up this picture. I don't know if you guys can see this okay. Right, so you've got you've got a situation where you lose area. So you go from the 2 big squares down to the 2 smaller squares. You clearly have lost habitat, right? But in addition, you're more isolated. So there's a bit of an isolation effect. On the other side, you have, well, when you kind of compare from the right to the left, you may have more, smaller ones. They've been kind of chunked up into smaller ones. So habitat loss of area versus habitat fragmentation. You could have gained a couple extra patches, and so you still have the same area. So you really haven't had habitat loss, but it's fragmented. They're kind of configured into smaller little patches, and so it's harder to tease those things apart. What did they say was the major thing? The major thing is that there's a journal effect, right? Do you remember what they picked up about the journals? As we're reading a ton of articles ourselves this semester. What did they mention? Anybody? What do we tend to do when we're rushed and we don't really have a lot of time to read an article? What are we going to do?
Probably just read the abstract. Yeah.
So what Kariba was talking about is, he was starting to think, if I just did this survey and 76% are reporting positive effects, like where is the issue here? Is it journals? And so he went through and he did a quick survey. He looked at impact factor on journals. So if you guys aren't familiar with that term, like journals like Nature and Science are really high impact. They're like your top tier, like your goal schools when you're applying to college. And then the lower your impact factors, the less higher quality of an or more specific to like your field niche type journals. And so he was wondering, like, well, are the most heavily read, most kind of elite journals only kind of telling the story of habitat fragmentation being bad? And he went through and he did the survey and he found that not to be the case. It's kind of across the board, higher versus lower impact factor, same kind of story. And then he went through and he did an additional evaluation to see whether or not the abstracts are telling a different story than the results, right? So he went through and he compared your take-home messages you'd put in your abstract versus the findings in the results, and they just didn't match up. So what they're finding is that researchers are scared to report that habitat fragmentation can actually be a positive. And in particular, they mentioned in this chapter that specialist species tend to have a greater benefit to habitat fragmentation. They mentioned that biodiversity tends to increase when there's greater habitat fragmentation. Now, I didn't dig into the articles he might have referenced to speak of that, but I mean, that really struck me, right? I mean, why would species richness increase when you're getting more of this kind of edge? And I thought, it's probably that maybe you're getting invasives, right? Of course, biodiversity will increase when you have, more invasive species in there, which would come in with greater edge and maybe less area, right? Those more R selected ruderal type organisms, right? So I was sort of surprised. It's, it'd be interesting to see what kind of organisms he's talking about in terms of the biodiversity increasing when it's fragmented. Are we losing the native species, gaining those other invasive species? But in general,
Yeah, and I mean,
yeah, go ahead, Reagan.
I was gonna say, like in invasives too, invasives can be good. Like we always used to think of them as being like all bad, but they can be good.
Yeah.
And I think also it's partly like our perspective on it, because eventually invasive will become like kind of integrated.
Exactly.
Eventually, it might take a while, but it happens. And then there are like cases where, like, I know we're gonna like kind of talk about this later, but there are cases where like people have like this national animal and then it's like actually from a different place, but it's like really, it's just like part of their like culture, like just like they just see it as part of like where they live.
Yeah, the Guadalupe raccoon, right? Oh my God, the kids have already opened the door. I'm sorry. Yeah, so just wanting to remind everybody that we have to really be careful. We have to be skeptical. You know, the textbooks seem to be kind of falling along the same lines, you know, as a result of maybe them just taking for granted. Rowan, I am teaching. No, I just started. Please. I texted Dad. I will text him again. Yes, I'm sorry, guys. Please go downstairs. I'm gonna text Dad right now. Right. For the love of God. Sorry. Oh, when the kids only will be quiet when they game, right? That's what it becomes. But yes, Reagan, your point is well taken. You know, we spend a ton of money to remove invasive species. There's invasive species crews that are, you know, deployed every summer to parks, even in our area, to remove things like autumn olive and honeysuckle and you know, buckthorn and other invasive species that have sort of naturalized because they've been here for so long. But then there's other invasives, which, you know, people will go out and they'll harvest. I actually did a webinar over the summertime about how to prepare foods using some of these invasive species. So how to make pesto out of garlic mustard. Stinging nettles can be, if they're harvested at a certain time. Have you guys ever walked in a place that's got stinging nettles? They're the worst. Right? You don't recognize it until after, and then it feels like your hands have like touched, you know, fragments and shards of glass. I know if anybody's been out to Missisquoi and gone into the floodplain, we encountered it. But anyways, if you harvest it at a certain amount time in the season, you can saute it, and it's just like, you know, chard or you know, broccoli rabe, green similar to that. So, you know, there can be some positives. In addition, our bees are in trouble, right? And anything that's going to flower and can provide nectar will help them out. So, you know, we have to kind of maybe be cautious as we consider that sort of thing. But yeah, the story is, you know, more complicated than maybe we've been told.
Yeah, I think it's just really interesting because like just with us, I mean, humans haven't really been recording, you know, history and stuff like in the grand scheme of things for that long.
Yeah.
And like what if there are some native plants, you know, that we think are native, but like a long time ago were actually like from somewhere else, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of cases of that. Yeah.
So it just makes you think, you know, I feel like the ecosystem kind of adapts, you know, eventually, and that's just kind of what it naturally does.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there aren't like invasives that like are doing, you know, are harming the environment. I'm just saying that probably eventually it will kind of equal out. It will kind of
Right.
like be okay.
Right.
Would
Well,
you,
good. Yep, go ahead.
sorry, would you say that like the concept of invasive species is like an anthropomorphic concept at this point?
Well, absolutely, right? We in some cases define what we consider to be a pest or a weed, right? Because it's influenced by our opinion or us having to kind of avoid or change our behaviors. So in many cases, yes, in terms of like our behavioral responses to it. But by definition, it coming in from another area where it was not, you know, was not originally found. And again, how far back, like Reagan was saying, how far back do we have to go until we were able to kind of see that? So yeah, I mean, in a sense, for sure, you know, we are coining these things as invasive because we're having to adapt around them. Over time, you know, they become naturalized, many of them, because they're just such a good, they do such a good job at what they're doing, right? They're really good at dispersing, and they can handle living in rough, you know, terrain and limited resources available to them, and nothing eats them. So, you know, they're doing just what they're supposed to be doing. And is it really worth us putting the energy? Kind of like when we talked about, you know, the triage idea, You know, if you've only got a handful of species and you're way under the 50 to 100 that you should have, is it worth us putting all the money out into removing them? Because it's really costly when, you know, perhaps we just observe a resilient response in the ecosystem, right? And it becomes a part of it. It's still performing an ecosystem function. And we'll see some examples in the lecture, you know, invasive grasses and whatnot that still provide resources and habitat for organisms. So why would we want to remove it if it's, you know, doing the same sort of ecosystem function? So good question. All right, I'm sharing screen with you guys right now. Just wanted to remind everybody that we have the book club pair and share due on the 18th, okay? So that's going to be in the Dropbox because we're going to be doing, you know, the breakout room pairing. So over the weekend, make sure you guys make some headway on your book and address that rubric and get that situated for us. So that'll be on the 18th. I want to share with you guys in our section on invasives today. I'm just going down to the invasive area. I wanted to point out, obviously, right, we've got our lecture here. You guys are seeing this, thumbs up. You're seeing the slide, okay? We're seeing the Moodle site?
Yes.
Okay. Right below the lecture, I've embedded a video for anybody who has not seen the Cane Toad movie. It is a must see. And I suggest it's like, you know, 40 minutes, absolutely hysterical. You can see this guy, you know, talking about cane toads and the issue in Australia. I've got a couple slides that talk a little bit about the cane toad problem, but I think some of you have heard of it already from general ecology. Anyways, it is worth the watch. I'd like to hear your feedback on it for Tuesday. So give that a watch over the weekend. I also wanted to let you know that I have this link here, which I think is just interesting, but nothing that we need to spend a ton of time on, but I want to point it out because some of you, this might like involve you guys and your family and stuff back home. How many of you guys have a really nice garden, flower garden in the backyard back home? Some of you, your parents into gardening, or maybe you're into gardening. Yeah, me too. And my mom is huge. In fact, I'm like, for those that know me, I'm totally scared of insects. Buzzing, stinging ones in particular. And so when I go back to my mom's like backyard Shangri-La, I can only be out there, you know, early morning when these animals are in torpor because it just freaks me out. So she has flowering plants like Cook and Gardner. And in particular, she is very proud of her honeysuckle that she has kind of all over the place. And I wanted to kind of call your attention to it because if you, well, this is just the berry of the honeysuckle that's pictured here. But have you guys seen the honeysuckle flowers? Right? They have such great fragrance. Let me pull it up. So the one that my mom's got is this one, right? But the one that you might see in the woods around here looks more like this one. This white one, okay? Absolutely beautiful, right? Hummingbirds love this stuff. They will just flock to it like bees will. It's absolutely delicious fragrance, right? They're amazing, right? And they grow into these monstrous, here's a shrub, I think, where you can see them. But you can buy them, you know, you can buy honeysuckle in stores in this area, right? Now, the question becomes, it may not be the exact same species as the Japanese honeysuckle that we see in the understory. So right around 2 weeks from now, as we start seeing the snow go away and you guys are driving down the road, you might be looking mid-canopy as you're driving on the roadsides. Look kind of mid-canopy. You'll notice there are some shrubs that are going to start greening up faster than the trees above and some of the other plants that are around. And these tend to be the invasive species. They have this edge with this phenology. They get in there, they start photosynthesizing, they draw in their pollinators early, and it gives them this edge. So we have invasive buckthorn and honeysuckle, as well as a couple of others, all over, you know, our mid canopy. If you go to Ruger Woods, you're going to see a ton of this stuff. And the article or the kind of case study that I've got right here is this little brief that is talking. It's a man, he's a park naturalist from, you know, he directs Franklin Park, a city-owned kind of natural area. And he gives kind of nature walks to some of the local school groups. And, you know, here's him kind of mentioning, you know, why we need to worry about these sorts of plants, that, you know, the kids are on the walk, they see these pretty berries. She asks if monkeys, you know, will eat them. And he says, no, we don't have monkeys, but the birds will. And then the birds are going to go and fly to another perch, and they're going to disperse the seeds after they've eaten them. And that's how this stuff will spread, right? So, you know, I got to thinking, this is 100% what happened to me. I moved to my house here. I wanted to like recreate the Shangri-La and bring in biodiversity, right? I wanted to have birds. I knew that hummingbirds would be attracted to this. I went out and I bought a trellis and I planted this honeysuckle, but the pink one, right? And I watched it seed and so on. And I thought to myself, it might be so similar. I wonder if there's some potential hybridization. It's clearly going to have a similar life history. Have I just done something really bad, right? Are local birds going to come in and grab those seeds, and are we going to end up having some invasive spread? So this again is just an article, you know, of this man talking about him. You know, he's reflecting. He's in like a Cook and Gardner kind of place, and he's pausing and he's seeing all of these for sale, invasive species pretty much. And he's asking whether, you know, in his mind, like, how are we going to ever solve this problem? I'm a conservationist, he's saying to himself. How can we solve this problem if we're selling it, right? And people who are trying to do good and enhance diversity and bring in, you know, save the monarchs and so on, are planting it in their yards, right? So it goes on to talk about, these people bringing in honeysuckle seeds. Rowan, please, you can have my phone. Just leave me alone, all right? I'm trying to teach. In 1927, it was imported and it was brought into these kind of commercial nurseries and so on. Everybody's got these wildflowers growing, and the same is true of other things, right? St. John's wort was brought in. And destroyed acres of rangeland. Mosquito fish brought in to control mosquitoes, and then now they're hybridizing with native fish, right? And so what should we do about these species? I know we always try to, if you guys have been to Lowe's and whatnot, you've probably seen there's a section of like native shrubs, or like ones that deer won't eat, and things that they try to encourage people, but there's a price point difference. So oftentimes these are, more reasonably priced as compared to some of those native ones. So this is just kind of a back and forth of him, walking through this process, and then, several questions that talk about, is this really the right thing to do? And then there's, some discussions here, a couple of articles, like, an interoffice memorandum, Washington Post, right? Talking about landscapers, condos, right? Planting all of these things, right? Russian olive, all these exotics, and they can go and they can spend this money. But then over here later on, he's saying, but we're spending $123 billion per year to clean up our ecosystems after these things escape. So we have a hand at making this, precipitating this issue, right? So again, just wanted to remind everybody, as you guys go back, at the end of the summer, and you're out shopping and whatnot, be thinking about these things, right? There's choices out, and long story short, I went through and I pulled up the honeysuckle, and I believe we burned it in the fire pit. But every time I see honeysuckle in the yard now, I go and I dig it up, and it's kind of a pain to dig up. You got to make sure you get the whole root system too. So it might be something to talk about with mom and dad, maybe something to think about, right? Prevention, rather than, spending the money up front, prevention and education, as opposed to spending all that extra money in restoration, right? And remediation after the fact. Okay. All right. So let's get started on invasives. Again, honeysuckle shown right here, and purple loosestrife, right? This is a wetland plant, very beautiful. And we do have some native loosestrife. that look a bit similar. So, you know, let's kind of walk through some definitions. These are, you know, exotic species. They've come from their habitat. They are not native to the new one, but they can tolerate the conditions. And if something is naturalized, I think as Regan was alluding to, over time, these native species can become a part of and a functioning part of an ecosystem, right? And they'll self-perpetuate over time. So this is kudzu down in southeastern US. This is really a big problem, but an invasive vine that's all over the place. So these are some terms that are, some of them are just kind of repetitive, right? And introduced species is going to be, you know, an invasive species. Cryptogenic, that's the one. Crypto, you're not really, you know, like you're hiding, like cryptocurrency kind of thing. But cryptogenic, meaning like you can't really tell, the lines are a little bit blurred as to whether or not it is an invasive or not. Indigenous would be like your endemic species, right? An introduced species is going to be like your invasive species, and native is going to be like your indigenous, right? Reintroduced is brought back in after it was there no longer. So again, just some terms to be familiar with. I thought this is an interesting kind of take home, right? It takes an awful lot for an invasion to occur, right? This is sort of the rule of tens, they call it, right? So only 1 in 10 species that gets brought over, imported over, will escape into the wild, okay? So chance of that happening is 1 in 10. And then of those that escaped, 1 in 10 will actually be able to establish. So the conditions in the vicinity will be ripe for them to kind of take hold. And then of those who've established, only 1 in 10 will become invasive. So they would be able to kind of take advantage of the conditions. There's no competitors around and there's no predators around to kind of keep them in check. So it takes an awful lot for an invasive species to actually establish. We live in an area where, you know, we're right next to the lake. And so this is something that we, you know, really have to think about as well, right? The steps of invasion, right? It was native elsewhere. It made it over in transport. It's established. There's oftentimes a lag period as it's kind of acclimating to the region. It'll then spread and become that invasion front. And then ultimately you're going to have kind of localized ecological consequences to them becoming part of the community. And only later would it maybe impact humans, right? At a larger scale. So what makes a really good invader? These are, again, all kind of examples of what you would find if we're talking plants with rooterals, right? They're going to have lots and lots of offspring, make many, many seeds, really short generation time because perhaps they're not going to have a long lifespan. They're really good at dispersal, right? Their seeds have great adaptations for dispersal or being able to withstand, you know, changes in climate. And they don't have any natural predators, and that's one of the big keys, one of the big issues. Nothing's going to eat them, no disease is going to attack them, and that's why so often we see people working on engineering some sort of biocontrol that could be released. The hemlock woolly adelgid, there's, you know, insects that get released that are almost, lots of times they're parasitoid wasps, right? And so this article here, this is an article about purple loosestrife. So there's a picture right here, the article's listed. This is talking about this idea of enemy release. So there's no predators around, that idea of like there's no predators to consume them or you know, negatively impact them. Climate adaptation, right? And then genetic constraints. So this is basically the response. What is making these invasive species do so well under this new climate regime? Anything to the right of this line suggests that there has been a positive impact. So they evaluated these invasive species, in particular looking at loosestrife, and what they noticed, the one that's farthest to the right, is that they are gaining an edge because these types of species are better able to deal with climate change. Sometimes they have a little bit of a genetic predisposition to be more flexible, and obviously not having enemies around is helpful, but really they are well adapted or flexible enough to deal with climate change, and that's what's giving them an edge over these native species. So I just wanted to kind of throw up some examples here, number of introduced species over time. And this is in San Francisco Bay. You can see a massive increase. And it was interesting to note, they broke it out into a couple of different categories. So back in the early, mid 1800s to mid 1900s, they were getting about 1 invasive species in every 55 weeks. And then if you look at a more recent time frame, they're getting in 1 every 14 weeks. And it may be, even greater, even more so now. So I wanted to give us some examples, right? The brown tree snake in Guam, maybe you've heard of this story, but it was brought in native from Indonesia and Australia, and brought into islands to control the overpopulation of rats. And that happened back in the 1950s. They were really good at surviving at low numbers, right? They could persist at low numbers, which is, again, one of the traits of an invasive species. They are generalists. And that is where things become problematic. Normally, when you bring in something as a biocontrol, in this case, this is a predator, brought in as a biocontrol for the rats, right? It makes sense for it to target rats and nothing else, right? And this is true of the cane toads, you'll see in that movie. It turns out they went nuts. They ate everything and their numbers increased exponentially. They wiped out the endemic birds that were native to these areas, and you can see also the lizards as well. It created tremendous economic concern. Their abundance became so great and they could get everywhere that they were on high tension wires. They were in such great numbers that they were causing electrical outages all over the place. And they also are nest predators. So they would take out a lot of, the birds and the lizards that are ground nesting. As a result, their numbers declined. You can see over time, number of electrical outages over time, and it's, the trend is just, it's still increasing. And I think I mentioned to you guys, I had a student, Carrie Phillips, who went over to Guam to do, to do like a semester abroad. And she was talking about them falling, they fall in and they're in the ceilings of many of the buildings that they would stay in. So they're just everywhere. But I wanted you to see what happens to the community. This is the change in trophic groups, right? So we've got carnivores, insectivores. This is 1945, and in Guam, the island of Guam, right? So we had carnivores. The carnivores were terns. So those are the seabirds, monitor lizards, kingfishers are predatory birds as well. We have kingfishers here, and an oceanic gecko that must have eaten insects and other, maybe some small minnows and stuff. Then we've got insectivores. There was a ton of all these skinks and geckos. And now in 1995, we are down to 2 carnivores from that group. We've lost the birds. We've got the invasive, now kind of, out of control brown tree snake and the mangrove monitor lizard, okay? And then over here, you can see we've lost quite a bit in terms of those herps, right? The salamanders, geckos, lizards, right? In terms of the omnivores and the herbivores, right? Again, we're looking at bats and birds, right? A lot of doves here. And what you can notice here in 1945, we did have some of those ones that are not so ideal, right? The rats and the mice. But the Guam rail, you can imagine that's an endemic species, right? Probably the Micronesia honeyeater is not a super common species as well, right? And now we're left with just those kind of ones that we wanted to control, right? And the birds, forget about it. And the bats, they didn't stand a chance. So huge, huge problems. The small Indian mongoose, similar, right? Brought into islands, brought into control rats. Anytime you bring things into islands that are predatory, it's usually problematic. And so they went after, the endemic birds, the mammals, many of the reptiles, extinction of 5 endemic vertebrates, and 7 amphibians. So lots and lots of problems. Now we see the dwarf mongoose in the Virgin Islands as well. So we can expect, similar things to occur. Lots of economic losses, has gotten into the poultry industry as well, gotten in there and wreaked havoc. They're very much egg eaters. They will you know, go to town on the eggs. And then in terms of a vector, they do spread disease. They're known to spread rabies. Another one is the Burmese python, and you know, native to Southeast Asia, and it became an exotic pest in Florida and some other places as well. I'm gonna now change gears and share screen with Tierney, leaving you guys with this picture right here. And some of these are pictures from Tierney's article that she's going to share with us. Tierney, you going to be good to go?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yeah. Oh my God. That's a brave person right there.
Yeah. So the title of the article was called Severe Mammal Declines Coincide with Proliferation of the Invasive Burmese Pythons in Everglades National Park. So just a little bit of background information. Invasive species are one of the biggest threats to the native biodiversity and the functioning of ecosystems. They cause habitat destruction and alteration, competition. They reduce native predator populations, and they alter the native trophic cascades. And they can also completely wipe out or extirpate native prey populations. And reptiles are particularly problematic invasive species because they're ectotherms, so all their energy goes into storage and reproduction, and this allows them to persist at large densities. So Burmese pythons, they can get like 5.5 meters long, which is pretty big. I'm not sure how long this snake here is in the picture. But they have established themselves in Everglades National Park in the last 20 to 30 years, and they target native mammal and bird species like the key largo wood rat, the wood stork, and even American alligators have been seen being eaten by them. And one of the large reasons that they took over is because like people would buy these snakes at like pet stores, and then not realizing that they can get to be almost like 20 feet long, they're like, well, we don't want to take care of this anymore, and they would release them into the wild. So the study goals of this article, the researchers used road surveys to sample mammals in Everglades National Park before and after the pythons were established. They used spatial and temporal data to support their hypothesis that the presence of these snakes has drastically reduced the populations of native species in Everglades National Park. So they found between 1993 and 1999, raccoons, opossums, and rabbits were were the most commonly surveyed roadkill species. And then after, when the pythons have already been established between 2003 and 2011, no rabbits or foxes were found, and there was a greater than 87% decrease in raccoons, opossums, white-tailed deer, and bobcats. So this is a graph from the article. It shows the python removals from the park, and as you can see, it drastically increases over the years. And then this is another graph that was in the article. The first part is showing the temporal variation of the species. So the green is before pythons were introduced, and you can see there's quite a bit of diversity. And then the red is after. There's hardly any of the species here in the center. And then this graph down here is showing the spatial variation of the species. So the red is at the core of Everglades National Park, and there's like not very many species that are found. And then as you go further from Everglades National Park, you can see there are a bit more species found. So the take-home messages, generalist apex predators can exert extreme top-down pressure on ecosystems, resulting in large disturbances within the food chain. The example of Burmese pythons have completely altered mammal species richness in Everglades National Park. The decline of mammal populations allows for introduced invasive species to proliferate in ecosystems. And this also can allow for smaller prey species to increase because there's no predation by other predators in the ecosystem. And invasive species can cause thousands of dollars to damage to protected ecosystems. Just some connections to class, the impact of invasive species on native populations, what makes a good species, or what makes a species a good invader. They have high reproductive rates and they are selected. Top-down control of invasive species on populations, imbalance of trophic cascades, and increase in the number of prey species due to decreased predation. So just some questions to think about. What do you think that, oh, sorry, there's just a little spelling error. What do you think that most effective way to remove these pythons from Everglades National Park is? Do you think that pet owners should need a special permit to own such animals as the Burmese pythons? And what do you think the future of Everglades National Park looks like?
Good questions. Those are good ones. What do you guys think, those in the audience? What do you think is going to be one of the most effective ways of removal? You may have heard of other stories similar. Think of like the lionfish and whatnot. Are there things in the news that you've heard of how to deal with these guys? Anyone go to a restaurant down in Florida or Texas and found anything interesting on the menu?
Alligator.
Yeah, alligator. But I'm thinking, right, they have like rattlesnake roundups and stuff. Have you guys heard of that? And they have, and you know, and also they're trying to remove exotic lionfish, and then, you know, try and prepare them appropriately in restaurants so that they might become something that people will seek out as a way of kind of helping to feed the control. So, you know, in a sense, like if there's a high demand for that product, that people would you know, go out and harvest them more rapidly. And same is true of rattlesnakes. I have no idea if they're doing Burmese python roundups, but certainly
Actually,
are they?
I think they actually just passed something that like allows for like them to be used as a food.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm also noting in your picture, I think that's poison ivy right behind it. So it's like a double action punch right there. What do you guys think about permitting?
I was thinking, I don't know the exact word for it, but paying people to do it, like offering a reward, like warranty.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a finder's fee. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe it's something I mentioned in general ecology. Do you guys remember the Judas snakes? Remember that story? I mean, I used to go to Sunday school, right? I used to go to church all the time when I was a kid, but I stopped doing that stuff. So I don't know like all the Bible stories, but have you heard of Judas? Anybody out there? He like betrays somebody. So anyways, one of the things that I've read and they talked about, and I believe it's with these pythons, is that they place a transmitter on one of them, maybe a female, and that female then during the reproductive season will lead the researchers to the congregation of them mating with her. And it's like, you know, she's led them to the death of, you know, the species kind of deal. Like, you know, she's betrayed her kind. But that's one way that they have been able to effectively get more snakes is by, finding one that they know, they could track again, and would lead them to more. Any thoughts on Everglades? Are we gonna start losing some of those endemics?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we did.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and
But-
I mean, I also wonder, so many other things have happened in the Everglades. Climate change is impacting them. I'm sure invasive plant species has impacted, the diversity as well. Fragmentation, obviously, more roads built in the vicinity, even if it's not through the park, which might be more protected. Even dirt roads and access roads, as we learned in the last, lecture, can have an impact on a lot of these organisms. So great. Anything else to add, Tierney?
No, I think that
Yeah,
covers it.
awesome, good stuff. Huge animals, massive impacts. Yes, okay. All right, so you guys can see, I embedded just a little bit of content that was Tierney's. I think I presented it in the past. Other introduced predators, this is Nile perch over in Lake Victoria. If you are aware of this story, Lake Victoria was one of the most highly diverse places, water bodies, had hundreds of cichlid species. Imagine they're isolated. Obviously, there's not going to be a lot of movement. If you're a fish, there's not a lot of movement from other places. Isolated for a long period of time, no introduced species that had come in. There was speciation galore. Must be a lot of microhabitat differences in this large lake. And so, it allowed for this kind of, rapid speciation event of cichlids. They brought in the villagers as the village kind of built up around. They decided that it would be really a good thing economically and for them to have something to eat, that they would stock the lake with Nile perch. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a picture of Nile perch. Let me see if I can escape out of this. Because am I sharing? I'm not even sharing screen with you guys, am I? No. So here's the Nile perch, right? And you'll notice as the Nile perch was introduced, okay, you'll see all the diversity in species, right? We have piscivores, these are fish that eat fish, molluscivores, these are fish that are going to eat shellfish. We've got insectivores that are eating bugs, zooplanktivores eating zooplankton, detritivores eating kind of the, decaying waste and whatnot. And now over time, you're not only losing species, but you're losing the diversity in trophic, structure in there. And it happens rapidly, right? 79, 80 introduction. It doesn't take very long for you to be left kind of with the perch. And let me just see if I can pull up a, image. They can get pretty big, right? So you can see how, like, yeah, this makes sense to, you can eat a lot of this, but it can also be a massive.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I didn't know they got that big.
Yeah.
Because like the white perch and stuff, and like around here, and like
right.
is so small compared to that.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. That is probably not a good. It was not a good idea. Yes. And let's see. So over here, what features do all of these invasives share? And Tierney kind of pointed them out, right? They are oftentimes predators, right? They're oftentimes brought into sensitive areas like islands. And part of the reason why they can wreak such havoc on those islands is that islands tend to not have a lot of predators, right? There's just not a lot of niche availability, space and resources to support a ton of predators. So if they do have some, they only have usually a couple of predators on these islands. So there's no top-down control unless people hunt them. And so they experience what's known as this natural enemy release, right? They just don't have top-down control. And that's, you know, one example. Another example that's kind of close to home is with our domestic cats. And I'm going to kind of segue into, I think it was Devin has this presentation on the domestic cats, but I wanted to click in, right? 71% of introductions to islands appear to have a negative impact. Now, I want you to bear this in mind. We're going to have another chapter in the Kariba book. I'll probably assign it for you guys to kind of look over, and we'll discuss on Tuesday, okay? It's in this invasive species section, so just like we did with the habitat fragmentation. Give it a quick read. It's going to make you think about this in particular. I believe it's the one about the cats. Or it might have mentioned that already, but 30% impact on the land bridge islands. So the oceanic, very much isolated islands, 71% impact. Those kind of more nearby and ones that have oftentimes a connection to the mainland, not as much of an impact, but still a negative impact. I wanted to click on this. Like I said, Devin's going to speak on the Nogales article. But this is kind of a fun little interactive. Hopefully it's going to pop up for us. Anybody have cats?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Okay, so you might enjoy this. I am not a cat lover. I've had so many interactions with cats that can't be trusted. I'm sure you've encountered some of those as well. And so anyways, this is kind of something that I thought was pretty neat, right? These are a whole bunch of different cats. They all have their own little names here, Phoebe, right? Which one do we want to see? These are collared cats: Ginger, Chip, Sooty, Orlando, Hermie, Phoebe, DB, Kato, Coco, Rosie. Any preference? Anybody? Any cat lover out there want to pick one?
Sooty.
So that was over here. Okay. All right. So there's just really kind of a cool little story, right? They put transmitters. They were able to evaluate the movements of these animals. So encountering a fox, you can kind of see where are these pets going in relation to your home if you place a transmitter on them. And again, this was all in part of, you know, trying to figure out, do they really have an impact on the local, you know, birds and small mammals in the area, right? I don't know if you guys have cats that are mousers, right? That'll leave you little presents. They'll bring them into the house or leave them on the doorstep. But in this case, they were trying to figure all this kind of stuff out. So he, you know, it was the largest roaming of all the 10 cats that they visited. Goes over to the farmland, goes over to investigate some of the water, encountered a fox. There's a little video of it. And so you can explore some of their movements.
I really think people should try to keep their cats inside, just because they're hunting, but also there's predators that could get them. That happened with my one cat at our old house. I think there was like some kind of owl or something. We still don't know exactly what it was, but it got our bunny.
Oh God.
Because we had our bunny out for a little bit to get him like some outside time.
Yeah.
And it got our cat, and it left just their heads.
Oh no, that's so
Yeah, I'm glad I
sad.
wasn't the one to discover them. My mom was, but just
Ugh.
thinking about that makes me really sad.
Very
And
traumatizing. Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, just be careful because depending on where you live, there can be some bigger predators out there that will get
Yeah.
them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man. On that note, let's sorry about that. Let's
It's okay. I'm sorry
no.
to make you sad.
Another reason I will never have a cat. It's just too risky. No
Yeah.
predator around here is going to attack Boggs. He's just much too much too lazy. So let's transition. Devin, you've got the Nogales article on the cats, right?
Right.
Okay, I'm going to share screen for you.
All right. Is it coming through all right?
Yep.
All right. So I've got feral cats and biodiversity conservation, the island problem. So basically the gist of this article is that it talks about how feral cats are devastating island ecosystems. one of the major reasons that they can actually do that is because they're very much generalists, and they have a very opportunistic approach to hunting. So they're very good at taking out large quantities of small things in a short amount of time, which is not very good for native bird species, because that's one of the specific species that they're really good at killing a lot of. And I have some more examples from an outside article about that a little further down the line. But like was just mentioned in the PowerPoint, the native carnivores are rare, and they don't have feral cats don't have any predators at all really on a lot of island systems. So there's no way to control them aside from humans actually controlling them. And they've contributed to 14% of 238 vertebrate extinctions recorded by the IUCN, and they threaten a further 8% of species on the critically endangered list, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's actually quite a bit. So this study in particular, they used the IUCN list, human population size factors, and island size criteria to identify which islands they actually wanted to study. They ended up picking 12, but they used island sizes that were smaller than the largest island where they had a successful campaign at lowering and getting rid of the cat populations. And they did the same thing for human populations. It had to be smaller than the most success that they had. And from that, they produced these prey lists of the animals that were on the island. There were a lot of these. I just picked this one of the birds, though. They looked at the animal group. Land birds and seabirds were the most targeted by the cats. They listed the island, the region, the size of the island, the species category, and other introduced predators that may have been on the island, because cats weren't just the only predator that they had to face. On these islands, there were a lot of invasive species, and a lot of them were invasive prey species on top of some more invasive predators. And invasive prey species, especially when they're rodents, kind of feed into the feral cat population, because that's a lot of easy prey for them. With their methods, however, they acknowledged that when they were analyzing the diet of the feral cat beforehand, the analyses that they had were rather low quality, so they couldn't really apply it much. And the other thing that they brought up a lot throughout the paper is that when it comes to feral cat research, there's actually not a lot of information about how they actually impact systems and impact extinction, and especially in specific categories like how they impact invertebrate populations, for example. There's not a lot of information about that, so it limits what they can actually do. And they also acknowledge that there were limitations that came with using the IUCN Red List. Perhaps they missed some species on the islands here or there. Controversies with this, however, people don't like the idea of killing cats. I mean, we just talked about how sad it was for a cat to be lost that was close to someone. But people just don't like killing cats because they're cute, and they're not something you can really say with a lot of heart behind it. Oh, let's go eradicate this cat population. But the good thing is that from these things that I have up on the screen here, there's a lot of ways to actually control the population without actually having to directly kill them, which is what a lot of organizations advocate for, as opposed to just the usual methods that you might dispense against an invasive species, like, oh, let's go out and like hunt them or trap them or get rid of them in mass with poisoning and all that.
And I can speak to that. My sister is a vet down in Texas. She went to Texas A&M. And one of the things that the vet school does is they have a trap and neuter program. So they will have people in the neighborhood bring in these animals, and it gives the vet trainees, right, practice in spaying and neutering, which is excellent, I think. It's a win-win.
Yeah, they do trap, neuter, and return.
Yep.
So how it ties into the class is the big concepts that it pulls from is also extinction in genetics as well as invasive species, of course, since that's the unit we're in. But um, the feral cats can put a strain on populations so that even if you do manage to control the population in time, and the article also mentions that while they were even researching some of these 12 islands, many species that they were actually looking at didn't make it before they even finished surveying everything.
Wow.
So the feral cats are very good at hunting and taking things down. But even if you do manage to control them in time, there could be a strain now put on that population since it's an island system. Now the genetic pool of that species on the island is severely weakened because of it. So there's still a lasting effect afterward. And as an invasive species, they were introduced by humans releasing their pets or just uncontrolled breeding. They're brought to the island by humans, released. The invasive prey species that I brought up earlier allowed them to establish themselves very easily and very fast because there's no prey limitations. It's always there, it's always available. So you can see that they're in a few of these pictures here, especially where they're being helped by humans, they can get very fat. So you know that they're doing very good out there. But they can easily spread and then they can have their ecological impact. And the resolutions that they brought up in the article, some of the things that can be done, legislation, which is sort of just the broad thing that you can do. You can sort of encompasses everything else. But there's the spay and neuter programs that we just talked about, trapping and neutering to make sure that they can't reproduce anymore, which makes it harder for them to continue to be established in an area, especially if you combine it with the other things like pet registration and controlling imports on an island so that no more can actually get in. So the population that you have is just all a spayed and neutered population. They can't reproduce anymore. Even if you want them to be outdoor cats, their impact is lessened over time. While you should keep them inside, and that would probably be something that would be covered under the legislation of sorts. There's also the microchipping that you could do so you could track them a little more efficiently to determine if it's going to be a problem, if you put everything else in, if it's a problem to let them actually go out and roam. But the other thing that's really important that they brought up is that even if you get rid of the feral cat on a lot of these islands, there's still a lot of other things like rats. So what they said was, well, if we're going to control the feral cat population, that might not be enough. We might have to do multi-species eradications. We might have to pair up. We might have to look at and kind of solve it like a puzzle. Which species do we have to get rid of first in order for our funding to be used in the most efficient manner? That's like the most important thing, because you want to use they don't have a lot of funding, so they want to be able to use it in the most efficient way, and they got to take out multiple species at once. So they got to think, well, what order do we do this in? Do we take out the rats first? Do we take out the mice first? Do we take out the cats first? That's one of the biggest puzzles they have to solve. Now, for an outside source, I wanted to bring up the Toxoplasma gondii parasite that causes toxoplasmosis, because that's one of the other major things that usually people talk about when it comes to describing cats as an invasive species. Cats themselves carry a lot of pathogens, and this is probably the most prominent one and the most well-known one of all. It's detrimental to both people and native species. So the study that I looked at here was based around the Hawaiian Islands. Cats were introduced there in the late 1700s. And the Hawaiian Islands have a lot of native bird species. And a lot of those native bird species are now suffering greatly due to a great many factors, but feral cats are one that are contributing to this problem. But not just the bird species, because the toxoplasmosis parasite can actually infect any warm-blooded host, which means that it can spread around and cause chaos on just about any warm-blooded population. And on the Hawaiian Islands, there's a lot of formations of cat colonies, which increase the likelihood of toxoplasmosis infection and increase the chances for it to spread and harm native bird populations. So they investigated 32 locations, 25 of which had cats, And 23 of those 25 locations were actually being supported and sustained by humans. So for about 5 of those places, they collected a bunch of fecal samples from the cats so they could check it for the parasite. And 6 of the 56 samples they collected were actually positive for the parasite, which is quite substantial. Oh, it was 4 sites. I'm sorry, not 5. So 3 of the 4 sites that they collected from were positive for the parasite's presence, but their methodological limitation was that with the methods that they were using to analyze for the parasite, they could actually be underestimating the amount of cats and cat populations that were infected. So the problem could be a lot worse. And one of the most endangered corvids in the world, which is the alala in the Hawaiian Islands, is very impacted by the toxoplasmosis parasite. So, and it's in areas where the cats are, so it's reasonably kind of scary to think about that population because it's in a very high risk area now because there's cats. They have this parasite that's really good at taking out this corvid, and that's a big reason why this research was taking place, was because they needed to assess just how in danger are these birds from the feral cat populations. And because they have human support, and a lot of the places with human support are right near the bird regions, the risk just keeps getting greater. And so they have a table here about if there were cats present at the area, how many times they visited it, how many cats they actually saw there, if they collected samples there, and if they detected toxoplasmosis in that cat population. And that's my references.
Awesome. Great job. Very thorough. Good stuff. Hannah, for the sake of time, and I know you said yours is a little bit longer, were you okay with Tuesday presentation? Oh, she must have dropped off. So I guess so. Anyways, I'm going to share back screen. We've got just a couple minutes left. Okay, so the Stevens Island wren. This is an interesting story, right? Stevens Island wren, a small island, has a lighthouse, right? A lighthouse keeper there, had a cat as companion, and brought over a bird, as many cats will do, left it there, and sent back to a museum to get stuffed. That was part of, an interesting organism is found, send it off to this museum for taxidermy and for identification. And it ended up being that was the last of this known species, this Stevens Island wren. So kind of a sad little story there. Hannah, I was just saying, are you okay with presenting on Tuesday? I just want to make sure you have time.
Yeah, sorry that I just left for a second. My Wi-Fi doesn't work, so I'm on my phone right now.
Oh, no, yeah, okay. Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to touch base on that. So as Devin had mentioned, right, there's a lot of like tugging at our heartstrings, and Regan as well, right? We have to consider this is a very touchy subject when we're talking about organisms that are our pets. It's not like we're removing mongoose and well, although I shouldn't say that, because normally we would have thought of raccoon as being something we might be okay with removing. However, we've learned that they've become people's pets, right? So it can become problematic. Now, are all invaders, a bad thing? I think we brought this up in our earlier discussion, not necessarily, right? Biotic homogenization, this is a concern that we have, right? As two organisms, two different species will mate, they maybe have, the ability to do so. You're going to lose that, that local adaptation. You're going to lose some of their unique features. But if climate is changing and habitat is lost, and this may be the one way that they are more vigorous and can maintain themselves and still have a little bit of a contribution genetically to their unique species, right? It is possible that these invaders get in there, and I think Hannah will probably talk more about this on Tuesday, they get in there and don't maintain typical ecosystem function. They result in some of these trophic cascades like Tierney was alluding to. They can also be a little bit more aggressive and obviously impact those native species that are a little bit more fragile. There's those hybridization concerns that we mentioned. And you can see here the mallard and the black and mottled duck, will mate with the mallard, can be problematic in many cases. One is more aggressive, one is more sensitive to habitat, differences in habitat, right? And as a result of losing habitat, you can see that, and one of them that's more flexible in habitat moving into these areas, it's easier for them to come in contact, it's easier for them to mate, and we start seeing this increase in hybrids. Normally we see that as a negative, right? But in some cases it can be a positive, and I mentioned here, some of these invasive species have been brought in, and I just want to put this slide up here. The big reason for introduction is often game, right? Think about the Nile perch, right? Way back when, probably early 1900s, a lot of this stuff began. A lot of sportsmen, a lot of people that were sort of in the Gifford Pinchot, utilitarian, thought process, felt that, the West, when you go out West, there's not a lot of really good game fish. And so as a result, they felt the need to take some of these Eastern fish and introduce them into these, some of these fishless lakes and lakes that didn't have them before, to build up the sports fish industry out West. And so you can even kind of see it here, the California Department of Fish and Game, which is like our DEC or like the Fish and Wildlife Group in Vermont, was once known as Fish Naturalization Society, right? I mean, this was one of the things that happened. You can imagine there's a whole lot of consequences to introducing all these different fish down the line. And you'll notice here, right, when we look at critically endangered, vulnerable species, so these are the species on our IUCN kind of worry list, right? You'll notice the dark blue here. These are, any place that you have 25 to 95% invaders in your system, you tend to have more consequences for these more vulnerable species, more endangered, risky species. Right, it just makes the situation much less robust. And I just had a handful of other examples. There's some kind of cool ones here. This green crab, which I didn't know much about, and if you click on here, it shows you they're kind of found in this area, or they have potential to be in this area. They're up on the West Coast, but they're attacking this rocky intertidal snail. They're also attacking these hard-shelled clams that are often harvested and people eat them if there's a big fisheries. But you can see here, right? Their native range is right here, their invasive range, right? They have been found in these areas, and they're potential threats to some other coastal zones. They are resulting in an adaptation in these snails to make them less palatable. So they've increased the thickness of their shell, and because that requires energy, their body size is being reduced. So you can imagine there's probably lifespan, longevity, and reproductive consequences to having to shunt your body's energy towards other things. But just invasive species resulting in the prey adapting in some way, which may not be to their benefit. Fire ants and bobwhites, right? Bobwhite abundance and years after the fire ants. So anybody who's been down in Texas or places down south where you've seen these huge mounds of fire ants, which are extremely aggressive, you can see bobwhite chicks tend to eat them, and over time, they just don't grow as well. And as a result, bobwhite are declining because of these invasive ants. In addition, the ants are often going after the same sort of food too. And then the zebra mussels, I'll kind of leave it with this idea here. But in our area, right, zebra mussels are the big one, right? We've got these tiny zooplankton as well that we'll cover. But, you know, Lake Champlain has zebra mussels. We have to wear our shoes. There is maybe a positive in that they can increase water quality, right? These are filter feeders, so they're going to be kind of going to town with their densities, but filter feeding. So they can increase your ability to see at greater depth, right? They'll reduce the turbidity in the area, but they obviously are out competing a lot of the native unionoid shellfish. So the unionoid mussels, as zebra mussels increase, you end up with more dead unionoids. Remember that we talked about Alabama being the state that has the greatest number of species, right? Behind Hawaii and California. And part of it is because of these unique shellfish. New York has quite a few. We have quite a lot of water bodies and rivers and whatnot. And we are losing a ton of them due to some of these invasive species. So it's something to consider. There's a guy working at a community college who's actually been working really hard at finding some sort of biocontrol against these zebra mussels, because it's really hard for anything to really eat them. And they're thinking a bacteria may be one of the ways that we could target them. So that's just kind of something in the news as well. So anyways, we will pick up with that on Tuesday. And we'll have a presentation by Hannah, but I want to make sure, again, I'm going to send out a reminder to you guys. Up next week is pollution, okay? And Maddie, Devin, Mina, and Derek, you guys are on task for presentations on Thursday, starting on Thursday, with the pollutant articles, okay? And in terms of homework, again, just making sure you're getting into your book and that you are working on your pair and share, which will be due, I believe that'll be Thursday, okay? And I want you to call your attention down to the invasive section where we are. And I'd like for you guys, if you have the time, and really it's kind of just fun, right? So if you're partying, not with friends, but with your roommates, right? Because we have to be socially distanced. This little video is absolutely hysterical. So if you guys could watch that and you know, maybe take a quick look at this, you know, my highlightations in the introduced species chapter by Kariva, that will just reinforce our ability to finish off the stuff on invasive species on Tuesday. Okay. Have a good weekend, you guys. And if anybody needs me, reach out. Okay.
Thank you. Have a good
Yep.
one.
All right. We'll see ya.
Bye.
Bye.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Matt, what's up?
I was told to ask you about Dr. Aldred told me that you were possibly looking for people to run trail cameras or something for a study.
Oh yeah, well, we have somebody on it right now. We have two people actually. Hannah Cave is monitoring with Liam. Do you know Liam Rasco?
No.
Okay, so he and Hannah are working on the game camera surveys right now. I don't know if Hannah's graduating. I know Liam is still around. We like to have usually two people on the project, but just knowing that you have interest, I know you're a hunter, avid hunter. We are often looking for people who like doing field work. So I can make sure that I speak with Dr. Aldred, not Dr. Aldred, Dr. Lesser. We actually meet today on Zoom at 2, and I can make mention that you have interest in the project. And when turnover occurs, yeah, we would definitely reach out to you.
All right. Yeah, I was just looking for more information. So
yeah, we've got 8 cameras at the Altona Flat Rock up at the burn. So we've got 4 over on the burn side and 4 on the control side, and we go out, you know, a couple times a season and pull the cards, swap them out with clean ones, and then go in and inventory, you know, get rid of the card, anything that doesn't have images. We're working on a manuscript right now because we've been monitoring animals up there since the fire happened. So it's been 2 years straight that we've had these game cameras going. So it's been cool to see as the vegetation recovers, what animals are coming back and if there's a difference between the burned and the unburned area. So we're probably going to be submitting that article the next month. We're working on the discussion right now. The other place that we're monitoring is part of like a Northeast wildlifer network. So Paul Jensen is a DEC wildlife guy who reached out to like people at Paul Smith's, people at Clarkson, people at St. Lawrence, people at ESF in the High Peaks area, like the Newcomb site. So all these places all over the Northeast and from all of the North Country towns, and inquired if we'd be able to monitor a game camera and put a scent lure up. So we've got skunk essence and a feather hanging on a snow stake that's facing the camera. And we put them not in the flat rock where the burn and unburned spot was, but we put it, because that's mostly jack pine, we put it over near the $1 Million Dam. I don't know, have you been up to the flat rock where the $1 Million Dam is?
Yes.
Okay, so right on the nature trail that's like right across from the dam, there's a bunch of pitch pine trees, and we put the two cameras out there with the lure, and we just started monitoring those. Liam reported, he went out over the weekend, that there was a red squirrel and deer, and prior to that it was just deer. So we're not getting any carnivores yet, but they haven't been out very long. There's another spot we've been thinking about. We do have quite a lot of cameras, and that is the Saranac Highlands, I think it's called. Have you heard of it?
No.
Okay. There were a couple of articles, little press releases mentioning that maybe there were some moose up in that area. And one cool aside, if you know where the Lewis Preserve is in Altona.
No.
Yeah, it's an interesting wildlife management area. It's near the tribal lands. So if the Genienka tribe is Native American reservation is up in that area, and it abuts property that they own, so you have to kind of be careful as you're in there. But it's an interesting tract of land. There's some old, I don't know if you're into history, but there's some old like iron smelting furnaces, so like the chimneys, the rubble of these chimneys where they used to burn the trees to make charcoal so that they could, melt the iron, smelt the iron and stuff. And additionally, it's like adjacent to the Great Chazy River. It's just a neat place. We had a student that, and I usually take my class out there to trap because it's more of a mature forest, and we've gotten some flying squirrels there. But we set a camera out there compared to Point Roche, compared to like Wickham Marsh, I think it was, and we got a moose.
Cool.
Which was just tremendous. So anyways, we're thinking of other places that we could potentially put them. And like I said, I think Hannah may be close to graduation, and if so, she would probably be bouncing off. But there's always, if field activities are up your alley, there's always opportunity to talk about.
Yeah.
research.
Mostly, yeah, I think having to do with wildlife would
Okay.
interest me more than
Yeah.
plants or other type of research. So the trail camera thing was very interesting.
Yeah. Well, are you going to be in the wildlife class with me?
I don't think so. It doesn't. Unless I can use it as credit towards my major, or if I have free time with credits.
What is your major again?
Planning and management.
Oh, okay. So yeah, well, if you're thinking career wise, that wildlife, something dealing with wildlife, I would try to maybe fit it in. It's one of those minor classes, so it runs all day on Tuesday. But if you could fit your schedule in the fall to have your Tuesday, Thursday open, so that what that might mean is you could take the wildlife class on Tuesday and the wetland class on Thursday. Those would count as a natural science course that you might need, or as an elective. I don't see any reason why Kurt or Kim or whoever is your advisor would not agree that those would be useful electives. Mary talks about wetland policies and regulation and things like that, which I think would be useful. And
I would even deviate it if I could for whatever sections I have to work towards.
yeah. So it still leaves you your Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule if hopefully your courses worked, that you could fit some courses in the Monday, Wednesday, Friday as normal. And then just you devote, 2 days for the field work. Cause I was thinking that like, I have you do a semester long project and you could be involved in game camera monitoring too. But an independent study is another way to go too. So I'll talk to Mark. I'll see if there's anything. And I haven't done a lot of field work in a while besides the game cameras. So there may be some other things that you and I could do as well. What about trapping? Are you local in the summer? I can't remember.
I'm about 2 hours away.
Oh, bummer. Okay.
Yeah. And this summer in particular, I think I'll be
home.
living with my brother in Oregon.
Oh my God, that's so exciting.
I know. I'm hoping for it. Well, there's 2 different things I might do. I'll stay at home. I applied for an internship that would actually, I wouldn't be back here next fall. It would be, I'd take a semester off. If I don't get that, which is not looking good, I will stay out there with him, but I'll be back next fall for that.
Oh, wow. That's so exciting. Is it near Portland? Where is it located?
He's in Hood River.
Oh,
yeah. I know. He's sending me all sorts of things to apply for the Forest Service.
Yes.
And there's like, I don't know much about the area, but there's like another conservation trail or something. I think they need like stewards or something.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's a
so
super good area for that.
yeah, I went to Portland and then we stayed on for like an extra week and we stayed in Hood River, right on the river. There's like a hotel there, but it's very much like it's kind of like Finger Lakes, right? It's very much a wine region. So there's all these kind of fruit vineyards and vineyards and places that have lavender farms and, all this,
That's super cool.
touristy
I
places.
just want to get out of New York and kind of explore.
Oh my God.
things. And he loves it out there.
Well, you may never come back because that's how I
probably
feel every time I
won't.
go. I'll tell
Yeah.
you, I mean, make sure that you guys get a chance to tour around. Like and he'll probably take you here, but we went to Multnomah Falls, which is, it's another touristy area. But if you drive the route, there's like, this is the rainforest. I mean, the trees that you will see in this forest will blow your mind. I mean,
Really?
it is just like you're in a tropical rainforest, but it's like you're in our forests, but just giant trees, lichen and moss all over the place. I mean, the microclimate is so different. I remember driving these windy roads and just saying to myself, man, this is the forest. Like these are the forests that create their own rainstorms because they're so massive. I mean, it's just absolutely so beautiful. I love it.
I think it's cool too. I'm kind of like it's a lot better protected out there. I
Yeah.
feel like because people started having that kind of conservation mindset as those big cities were developing or
Absolutely.
branching off and everything.
Yeah.
Seems like everything out there is very well preserved.
Yes.
So if that works out, I'll be doing all sorts of exploring. What was that called?
So it was Multnomah Falls, MULT. It's one of the most like pictured waterfalls, and there's a bridge like that people sell those posters. Is a bridge where people can stand and watch this waterfall. It's Multnomah Falls. Another place that was absolutely gorgeous, one of my favorite places, was Astoria, Astoria. And there's like an obelisk that you can drive up to. You see it from everywhere you are in Astoria. And Astoria, like it's like a port city. You can see the big barges coming in. There's Rogue Brewery, I think, is from out there. So there's an old sardine cannery that's been converted into this brewery. I don't like beer, but we were there because he likes it. But what's exciting, I'm sure you've seen Goonies, right?
No, I'm so bad with movies.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
After you watch K-Toads, you need to watch Goonies. It's like, oh my God, childhood, the best childhood movie. Anyways, it was set in this town. So like the jail downtown, the house where the kids are. Do you watch Thanos and Marvel comic stuff? The Marvel.
I watch like nothing.
Oh
It's
no.
bad.
Okay. Well,
I
that's
know.
all right. You're probably doing more exciting things. But I was gonna say Josh Groban is Thanos, and he was young in this movie. But anyway, it's a classic film. It was set there, so that's a lot of the draw. But it's a cute little downtown, and it's just absolutely so picturesque. And then you can drive the coast and see these big, giant, towering rocks that kind of emerge from the ocean coastline. And in that Goonies movie, like the big pirate ship comes from behind, and so like there's a lot of nostalgia when you visit this place. But oh man, you're gonna love it. It's so amazing.
I hope because I was a little bit on the edge just because I have things I do at home in the summer usually, but I've always been like, I kind of want to go out. And now that it doesn't look like the internship's going to work out, my brother is all about it. I actually texting him this morning about it. And he's like, yeah, come out, and he wants me to teach him how to fly fish, and he's got all the local knowledge and stuff. Now he lives there because he's a pilot.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
this is the perfect opportunity to just, while I can,
Yeah.
even if I don't end up working for, he sent me a link from pntjobs.org, what I think that's the trail, and then the U.S. Forest Service, he says, is headquartered there. And there's lots of opportunities.
Yeah. So what is the town where Hood River? I'll look and see if I have any leads on some Hood River stuff. But are you on Facebook? Because there's a Wildlife Science Network. Rowan, I'm still talking.
Hey buddy.
Okay. Say hi to Matt.
Hello.
He had Cheetos. I don't know if you can see the corner of this, but you don't watch TV, so you wouldn't know that commercial. You gotta go watch it. All right. I don't know, Dad. We'll have to call him because clearly he's not answering texts. All right. Well, I'm talking to Matt, right, Ro? Anyways, are you on Facebook?
I have a Facebook account, yes.
Okay. Wildlife Career Network is definitely a group to join. They have amazing job offerings. Yeah. Another one that you could look at is Texas A&M Job Board. TAMU is what Texas A&M something or other, but Texas TX A&M Job Board. If you Google that, it'll show up. In fact, let me show you why I like that one. Because you probably had GIS, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you were one of the people that mentioned that. Okay, let me share screen. Oh, you see it? You probably can see it, right? No?
Yes, I can see your screen. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just hosted by Texas A&M, but it's not like only in Texas. So you can see there's temporary seasonal positions, internships. There's GIS and computing. And volunteer opportunities. So, we could type in, I haven't done it by place yet, but let's see if we could search by place. Yeah, we could search by place. That's okay. And then you can see a 2-month position in Corvallis, stream ecology, Corvallis. Newport might not be too far from where you guys are.
This is W.
I can send you the link. Hold on. Go back to the main page.
I'm gonna figure out if I'm not gonna get the original internship I wanted. And then I'll be on. I have a feeling I'm not gonna get it, and then I'm gonna start looking and applying. Yeah. Even if I don't get something involved like in environmental science.
Yeah.
I would just go out there find.
Oh my God. Yeah, you have to explore, because you got to figure out where the next part of your life is going to be.
Yeah.
Right. The other one, let me pull up my Facebook so I can just send you a link to join that. You might have to be my friend though, so I don't know, but I can show you it. Um,
I'll look it up if.
What did I call it? Wildlife Career Network?
Yeah, I follow, I just wildlife job search.
Wildlife Science Career Network. That's what it is.
Oh, then I have a different.
Well, the one you found might be good too. So, a new
Career
website
network.
looking for environmental grad programs, trainings, research experience for undergrads, REUs, job opening in Los Angeles, needing a biologist, Wyoming, Jackson, Wyoming, needing bird banders, whale and dolphin internships. Like there, I just remember thinking to myself, man, had I been young, you know, looking for jobs or starting my career right now, there's so many more resources. Like we used to just have to, you know, you would go somewhere and you'd look for things tacked on bulletin boards, you know, like
Yeah.
it was really
Yeah.
hard to find anything. And so the Wildlife Science Career Network, Texas A&M Job Board. Another one that's a good one is Conservation Job Board.
Is it Texas A&M or A&M?
I'm sorry, it's
A&M.
my accent. I'm sending you the link though to it. And then on Facebook, it was Wildlife Science Network, and it was a group. So that one you'll just need to find. But these other ones, so this one, you can also search by, you know, type, policy and law, if that was really up your alley, wildlife, and then by location. So let's just pull up Oregon and see what they've got. Watershed protection, backcountry trip leader.
That would be cool.
Yeah, a master's program, seasonal trail crew in Portland. Multiple locations, meaning there could be a lot of, you know, could be a location that you could do this near where your brother is.
Mhm. That would be ideal because I would live with him.
Right, and I mean, additionally, I wonder some of these might be like adapted for COVID too, you know.
Oh, like
So that you could have flexibility to, you know, be working.
hunt program coordinator.
Yeah.
That doesn't quite literally mean hunting, does it?
Pheasants and
Full-time.
quail forever, full-time
Cool.
position. Yeah,
Oh.
I mean, you'd be one of the things. So I just searched by location, but you know, you're probably going to want to go in, maybe not choose the category since you're pretty
Mhm.
flexible, but you
Yeah, I
would
don't
want-
know what I want to do.
yeah,
really.
temporary, you know, paid, you know, those
Even
sorts of things.
unpaid.
Yeah, I mean, and that'll narrow down, you know, your options, I think. But
Well,
you know,
cool.
depending on that, just knocked back a few of them. I'm not seeing anything specifically for
That gives me a
Wood
good
River, but maybe.
start for.
Yeah.
But if they're close or.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you could always hang out with him on the weekends, and you know.
Yeah.
Oftentimes.
I know when he wasn't sure where he was gonna live, because he's a pilot. So he was trying to decide where he wanted to live. He and his girlfriend would just camp places because the weather is typically nice out there. So they would just, I would do that too.
Yeah, yeah. What is he, a commercial airline pilot, or is he small fly small plane?
Commercial. He
Okay.
went through like it was the last year they did it at our high school. They would like take you and train you to fly planes.
Oh,
and
wow.
he did that, and then he went to college for aviation and got a job with American Airlines. So it's pretty
Oh.
cool because he goes everywhere.
It's really exciting. It's really exciting. There's actually a whole science of airport wildlife, which might be of interest to you. And every once in a while, I feel like it's an annual thing. I get a message from somebody. I can't tell if it's like they're trying to solicit or if they want volunteers, but you can't really go hang out outside the boundary of an airport. Like there's all these security concerns and stuff, but oftentimes the airports are where, like eagles or snowy owls will come, right? They have to be wide open fields, right? And that's great habitat for rodents. And so a lot of these
I'd never thought of
raptors, yeah, they kind of move and migrate, and kind of these are some of their stopover points. And so just like when people build wind turbine places, right, they have to hire people in to do wildlife feasibility surveys to find out like how much damage, what was there before, and then during and then after, they kind of go back and continue these surveys to see if there's been any sort of a major impact to the community as a result of what has happened. And so I think maybe that's what happens with these airports, is they do a before and after and kind of throughout to see what some of those changes are. So I know birds maybe are not your big thing, but just thinking about your brother, I mean, I doing all the work that I did flying I was in a de Havilland Beaver to transport the bear. So that was an older, those planes, those probably repurposed from the war, but mid-sized plane that could transport four sedated bear in it. And then I was
That must have been very cool.
yeah, well, kind of scary too, because they kind of start beginning to wake up from sedation and you have to dose them again, and
Huh.
just a little bit scary. They're shackled and they have blindfolds on so that they don't attack you.
Why
if
did
they
you
were
have
to
to
wait.
transport them?
Yeah. Oh, so my research was and I've always told the story, but we were in a part of Alaska, McGrath, South Central, and the kind of like our DEC, but the Fish and Game were doing a longer term survey of moose in the area. So what they do when they survey moose is they find the adult females and they put GPS or radio collars on them. And so then every year, because it's that synchronous birthing, they all give birth like right around end of May, early June in 1 week, right? It's a way to flood the predators and overwhelm them so that some of the babies will live. So we can go out, like we can fly for 2 weeks during this calving season. We can find the moms because they have collars. And then every day we go back and find the mom and look around for offspring. And when the calves are born, that's when we take the helicopter out and would try and get the mom moved away. Like you can kind of, the rotors and the loudness, right, kind of shoos her away.
Mm-hmm.
And once the mom is moved out of the way, then then you can get out of the helicopter and go run over to the moose calves, which are very unstable in that, they're like a day old, right?
Yeah.
So we would put them in like a burlap bag, like a potato sack, and then we would weigh them with a big spring scale. And then we would take quick measurements on them and identify their gender. And then we would put a collar on the babies that was stretchy. So it was like a regular radio collar, but I would weave it into a dyed ace bandage. So the ace bandage was dyed a color that looks like the moose's skin. And so it'll stretch as they grow so they wouldn't,
right,
and it can break. Anyways, so we were interested in, I helped for 2 summers, I helped just exclusively on the moose calves and this mortality study. So now that the calves are collared, you could go every day, you could fly just high enough, and in your receiver, your little computer thing that's in front of you, you program in the frequency of the collars. And so you're listening you're flying high and you're listening for the cadence of the frequency on that collar. So it'll be like beep, beep, beep if the animal is alive and moving. And if the collar has not moved in a long time, like the animal was killed by a predator,
Yeah.
then a mercury switch closes in the collar and it sounds more like beep, 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 beep. So we would listen, cycle through all the collared animals on the receiver. Anyone that sounded faster, we would fly over and get a latitude and longitude in the airplane. Then we'd land and go and get into the 2-seater helicopter, which was my favorite of all times. And then we'd get out to where we could land near there, and we'd radio track. We'd take the antenna off of the side of the helicopter and we'd radio track into the dead calf and get the collar again and look around to see who had killed them, or if they had starved or been abandoned by the mom. And most of the time it was bear. So the last year I did my research, we got 20 GPS collars. So these are the ones that are communicating with the satellite, and you don't have to go physically get a location. It's storing the location of the animal on the collar. So we would just need to find that after, several years of figuring out that it was the bear that were killing the moose calves. They wanted to see where the moose calves were going. So see where the bear were going when they left their den. So we waited until like right before calving season, found as many bear as we could, put the collars on them. So some black bear and some brown bear, grizzly bear. And to do that, black bear, we could find roaming around, and those we darted off of the helicopter. So the fish and game guy, I was in the back, mixing up the drugs and putting it into the dart. And then the fish and game guy would be in the front seat, but attached to the seat, he's got carabinered into the seat so that he can lean out on the skid and target the bear in the rump with the immobilizing dart.
Wow.
And so then we put the collars on the bear, and then you want to make sure, you want to measure them, you want to make sure that they're healthy, you want to pull a tooth to age them, you want to put the tattoo in, right? So we had to actually take the helicopter and a bag that had a long, like when they rescue people in the bucket from like the water. And so we would airlift the bear to the tarmac at the airport and keep them in a trap, like a bear cage, and waited until we had maybe 2 or 3, and then we would load them sedated into this de Havilland Beaver airplane and fly them a distance away. In fact, they didn't disclose where they had left the animals with, they didn't tell me where they were, where we dropped them off. But I went on one run with them. So there was the pilot and then me, and I had to, it was still kind of chilly. The snow is melting there. So the immobilizing drug, goes out of solution when it's cold. So I had to like stick it under my arms, like stick it between my legs to try and keep it warm. And then anytime, like, the however long it took us to get to where we were going, we had to make sure that the animals were still, sedated a little bit. The idea was we wanted to relocate them with collars and see where they went afterwards. And many of them went right back to the same area where we had picked them up, even though it was like kilometers and kilometers away. It was really interesting to see that.
Wow, that's cool.
I don't do that stuff anymore. Now I just deal with kids. Anyway. Yep. So lots of adventure opportunities. And, that just as an aside, that was at Penn State. Like, when you go if you go on to grad school and you're looking for positions, don't assume that because it's Ohio State or Penn State or UMass that you're like bound to the region. My research always happened in the summer and just so happened to be in Alaska. So
cool.
Yeah. Anyways, well, good luck with that. And did you get my message earlier today about the outline?
Yes, I haven't gone on to see your comments, but I will.
Okay. Yeah, it was kind of like the outline that I pulled up, like the imaginary one that I showed the class
Yeah.
the other day. But yeah, I think you're on the right track. I just had suggested that maybe don't go in depth on every single one of the state's management plans. Maybe pick two that are like very compare and contrast worthy, right? And
Yeah.
then build those subheadings like I had mentioned, which you and I have talked about: climate change, land
Okay.
use change, and
Yeah.
stuff. And you should be good.
I found out that out a little bit on my own, between not doing all the states, because I just think that would be really hard to, it would take a lot more time than what
Yeah.
the term paper kind of
Yeah,
handles.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I found Vermont and New York have similar plans and are comparable.
Yeah.
And they kind of both have the most detailed, best ones that like
Yeah.
cover issues to conservation, what has gone on to solve those issues, what successes they've had, where they're
Good.
working, and like data and stuff.
Good. Yeah,
So-
I mean, the only other thing that I would say is if, like, for example, Maine is totally different, or Massachusetts is totally different because there's more urban areas,
Mhm.
that it may be worthy of you pulling a couple of items out of the ones that are very different from the New York, Vermont ones, which are so similar. And just, using that as kind of a foil to contrast. But yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of interesting nuggets in there and some good detailed data. But yeah, I would definitely make sure that you're pulling from journal articles in those subheadings that I suggest. But take a look at it if you run into trouble or need some extra, time.
I find I'm not very good at research. I don't know. Like, I have a good idea of what I want to do, and then just finding articles, they always just seem like, I don't know. So it takes me a lot longer than I wish it would to.
Yeah. Well,
do.
did I ever send you a long list of them?
Of articles?
Yeah.
Yeah, you sent me like 10 of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I
some
mean,
of them I couldn't access, and others I don't know if I'm going to use them because I found other similar ones.
okay.
And then I probably use like 3 or 4.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think what you need to do is you need to just take out a notepad, or take out, have the article printed out, and now you're sitting at your computer.
Mhm.
Read through the intro, skim through the rest of the parts, look to the discussion. I always like look to the discussion and the intro. And then if there's a good like take home message in any of those 2 sections, I just jot down a sentence in my own words that's coming from that. And then I make sure at the end of that sentence, I write the author's last name and year, so I know where I got it. And those are the nuggets that you're going to pull in. So go to the ones that have something to do with land use change or succession or forest turnover. Go in and pull a couple of those big take-home messages in your own words, and just pop them in under the heading you'll see of land use change. And you'll see over time, if you do a few of them, oh man, I've kind of got a paragraph forming, right? And then you just can embellish it. Go back to that article now that you've got your nugget. Tell me what these people did in terms of their research, and then what they found. So, you might, one of the take-home messages you might say is, 20 years after clear cutting, so-and-so found that that turkey abundance increased 30-fold. Okay,
Mhm.
that's a great take-home message. But prior to that, you can have a sentence. Now you go back, right? That's the one that was your big take-home message. Now you go back to that same article and you say, so-and-so 2018 tracked, 16 radio collared turkey over their molting season for a period of 3 years. They did this in, open, recently cleared forest versus, control reference forest. And then your next sentence is that big take-home message that you originally had. So I always keep in mind, like, I can use this resource the best, I can use this article the best if I am not confined to just like one sentence. If I say this is what they did and this is what they found, right? It can really give good context to the reader. And if you do that on a handful of articles, you've got like a solid paragraph.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, yeah.
all right.
I'm gonna keep working at it and
Okay.
everything. I do have a lot of papers of like my outline, and then they have more details and stuff and what articles I'm getting stuff from. But I just really need to like get more on, like you said, like to how land cover affects them, and then all the subcategories that we've been talking about. So
Yeah, yeah.
eventually-
Well, that McKaylee Glennon and Bill Porter article that we had talked about, look at their bibliography. Look at what articles they reference. I bet you a lot of them are going to be helpful.
all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if I can find a couple additional ones that are readily accessed, then I'll send you that information. So you're working the annotated, you're still working the annotated, right?
I submitted it. I have like 14 or 15 of them on there, and I annotated I think 8 or 9 of them.
Okay.
Like how
Good,
you
good.
would have like
Awesome.
you wanted. Just yeah, and I'm gonna keep going.
Awesome. Well, you don't have to go beyond that, you know, like that's totally enough. I know how much time you've been putting into the research. Yeah, it's just a
I think I'm
matter of,
just slow at like I don't know if it's putting the concepts together, or just inexperience in doing it, or also I hate having to work on my tiny little laptop.
oh yeah.
But whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll do it. So
Okay. All right. Well, feel free to reach out anytime. Okay.
yep.
All right.
All right,
I'll talk
thanks
to you
for your
later.
help.
Yep.
All right,
Bye-bye.